everyone, Scott Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What is happening, Rush Nation? Here we are. We are back with another show as promised. Stocks couldn't make it, but don't worry, you won't have to hear my drawl for another hour as you already have had it this week with me on a solo. Instead, I brought someone who used to be part of the 5 Yard stable, but has moved on to bigger and better things. Joining me this week is a face that many of you will know. And if you don't, then I'm sure know that you're going to enjoy having him for the next hour with me. He is a Devy and Dynasty writer for InBetween Media. He is also repping tonight the Devy Wildcard hoodie because he's the co-host on that. He also does a lot of content in the BFFL. He's the owner, GM, manager, I don't know where you are, of the Whole Crimson. Not Whole. Are you Whole Crimson?
Yeah, Whole Crimson.
Yeah, it's Whole. That's what I thought. And then I thought, hang on a minute. I know someone else in the Whole. Let's make sure that's right. Yeah. For Cartlich, how you doing, man? How you doing?
Yeah, I'm really well, mate. Thanks for that introduction, man. It's lovely to be here. My first ever appearance on a 5 Yard Rush pod, even though I was like part of the team for a year. You kept me waiting. I'm buzzing to be here, mate. And all that introduction has shown me is like I struggle to say no to anything.
Yeah, I think we all do, right? We're all degenerates in what we do, right? So it makes sense. Now, obviously, I mentioned that you were part of the 5 Yard stable year for a while. You moved on. What has been going on? What are you sort of focusing on? I'll give a brief intro, but what's sort of the niche that you've got into and the real passion of the content that you put together?
Yeah. So obviously, I've crafted my way into Devy, and it kind of happened a little bit just out of curiosity. Like, I haven't been playing fantasy for overly long. I think I've only been playing 5 or 6 years, but every year I sought out an opportunity to try something different and do something new, and it kind of progressed. And then eventually, I love college football. Always have loved college football. It's been a real passion of mine for a long, long time. And then I kind of stumbled across Devy, and I was like, hang on a minute. This just adds another wrinkle, another tactic, another layer, and that was it. I was hooked, and that's it. It's got me. It's well and truly got me. And the opportunity to talk Devy, to write about Devy, to basically help people with the transition of players moving from college into the pros, etc., just spoke to me massively. And it just one thing's led to another. Kevin, the team, invited me in at Fantasy Wildcard, and I've been co-hosting with the brilliant Jack for the last year and a bit now. And then, working with yourselves to do a little bit of writing, working with King's Fantasy Sports to do a little bit of writing. And then the opportunity came through yourself, Murf. You know, I should really say thank you. Put me in touch with the fantastic Seth Woolcock over at InBetween Media. And he was just looking for a little bit of help in terms of developing his college side of things, the college fantasy football, Devy fantasy football, and offered me the opportunity to get involved. So I jumped, and I am absolutely loving it. I'm busy, I'm working hard, but I love it. So,
yeah, I got to say, the guys at InBetween Media, and Seth in particular, Seth I've known a couple of years, and probably a bit longer than that, and he's just and we had him on the show fairly recently, a couple of months back. If you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to that. One of the great guys in the industry. There aren't many people who I could say like you could trust in. There's lots of people you could trust, but I mean, like, put you sort of pathway to good paid employment in this industry, and a good person to get to know and
absolutely
help you craft and help you sort of get to what you need to do to start earning good opportunities. And Steph, he's an absolute gem, and he's just one of the most positive people I've ever met as well, which is just he's awesome. So yeah, I'm glad you're there. It's a great stable to be part of, and big fans of the work there. So as you said, you're into college football. Do you want to tell everyone the team that you glory hunt or follow?
Yeah, so I am an Alabama fan, and I suppose I got involved in college football at the perfect time to be an Alabama fan. But the true reason for it is not just because they were winning. That was a happy byproduct of what was going on. It was It was genuinely because, as a Baltimore Ravens fan, I was fascinated by the fact that Eric DaCosta, obviously Ozzie Newsome as it was, Ozzie was a long-time GM and always tapped into his alma mater. We always went to Alabama and drew great success drafting players from Alabama. And I was intrigued, and I just started kind of watching and paying a little bit of attention. And then this guy called Nick Saban just like blew my mind, and I became absolutely kind of obsessed with Nick Saban and the process, and that was it. They had me then. And so it does just so happens they're very bloody good. But it really was down to just a little bit of research, like, who are Alabama? Why do we keep drafting from Alabama? Why is it successful? And then I came across Nick Saban, and everything that man does is just incredible. And what better team to hitch your wagon to?
Yeah, I mean, you got to give it to Nick Saban because he's the guy who couldn't coach Drew Brees when everyone else could. So that takes a real amount of talent to be that guy. No, he is the greatest. He is the greatest college coach of all time. In similar vein, that Jameis Winston's one of the best college quarterbacks of all time. Phenomenal at the level for what they do and achieve great success. But let's be honest, we're a bit of a joke when they stepped up in level. So those two will always be synonymous with me as goats of that level.
It's your pod, Murf. I won't argue with you.
You can't argue facts. No, I got a lot of time for Nick Saban. Honestly, I could sit here and say. I could sit here and keep the Alabama passion going, but that would be unfair. So let's get into this class. And there's a lot of people. There's people telling you how smart you are.
That's my burner account.
Yeah. Paying off for you, which is great. Let's talk a little bit about this class. We're at the point now where people are starting to really dip in. The combine's been and gone. People are getting to know the names. Some definitely more popular than others. I think before we break into the rookies, the one thing I want to get your opinion on are this year's mock drafts.
Sure.
What is your take on this year's mock drafts? And I'm going to hold silent and then I will share what my opinion is. But I'm curious to know what you think of this year's series of mock drafts that have come out. And I don't mean just the big stables. I mean just the ones that are sort of coming out every few days.
Yeah, so there's two lines of thought. Like, first of all, it is a better NFL draft class than it is necessarily a dynasty fantasy draft class.
Mm-hmm.
And for that reason, projection is a little bit muddled, particularly from a fantasy point of view. There is talent there, but in terms of your dynasty rosters, it's talent that I think in a lot of cases will flesh out your squads rather than being bona fide superstars. The bona fide superstars in this draft are in non-fantasy positions, which makes it tough. But that doesn't mean there's not talent there. And I suppose it's our job to dig in and find that talent. And I think in terms of when you look at the fantasy drafts and you look at the fantasy drafts that content creators are putting out there, it really has been, it's probably never been more difficult for, I don't want to say a casual, but people who aren't as invested in the tape and don't have the time to sit and watch the tape and grind and really study it. It's probably never been harder for that more casual fantasy player to get a real feel for where the market is.
Yeah, I'd agree with that 100%. I'm going to hold that thought for a minute because I think I probably didn't steer the question properly. I'm talking about the general NFL mock draft. So forget fantasy for a second and just talk about mock drafts, because I think the more casual players and the players who are trying to... There's a lot of fantasy players who don't watch college football, especially in this country. Sure. There isn't a lot that would do. And so they're relying and guiding on these mock drafts to get a value prop of players. What are your thoughts on just the NFL mock drafts, the top 32, 64 players going off the board in terms of how you're feeling with mock drafts? I mean, in terms of your opinions of what's coming off, do you feel like they're an accurate representation? Do you feel that they're nonsense? I mean, I'm just keen to get your sort of opinions on it.
I think again, like, it's a better NFL draft than it is for fantasy. And if you go again by traditional positional value, I think some of the real blue chip players in this class don't play blue chip positions. I think it's a fantastic class for off-ball linebacker. So even though they might be very high on a top 100, they're not going to crack your top 32 in a mock. It's a fantastic defensive tackle class. I think there's 8 guys worthy of a first-round selection. So when you think that's a quarter of your first round, potentially, if they were all going to go, all of a sudden value gets pushed down. You'll pick up good players in other spots. It's a good draft at corner. But again, I suppose the consent, the big thing is, where do the quarterbacks go? That's what we all want to know. You're going to see these quarterbacks mocked. In fact, I opened one this week where Charles Davis from NFL.com had quarterbacks go 1, 2, and 3. Now that really is a wild call based on the tape. He had Shedeur Sanders at 1, Ward at 2, and Jackson Dart at 3. Which, clickbait. We are in silly season, and I suppose again for the more casual watcher who's trying to form an opinion based on these things, look for resources you trust. Look for resources you trust and try and cut through the noise. If I was going to recommend anybody, I'd recommend Daniel Jeremiah every time. He's always ahead of the curve. His first mock always looks really out there, but when you go back and watch his mock 1.0 on draft night, there are things he sees before anybody else, and he's always a really good sounding board for your more casual fantasy player in terms of getting a value for where people are.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. I think for me, my view on this mock draft season is I want to be really careful in what I say here, but I feel it's a little lazy. I kind of feel like people haven't really looked at what the NFL is telling us about certain positions, the quarterback position being one, free agency additions and things like that, and looking at where they're willing to strengthen and pick up guys. And I feel like there's a lot of narratives that are getting passed to where it's automatic that Shedeur Sanders is not just the second QB off the board, which I think is far from automatic, that he's going to go in the top 3. And I guess it's this, I don't know if it's a bias, if this is how things are always done and that's how things are. And I just don't see a world where Shedeur Sanders goes in the top 10. I just don't. I don't forget the talent. I'm not even talking just talent. I'm talking about just need, positional need. I don't get it. I don't see it.
If he gets past the Giants at 3, there is a real kind of thing of like, right, where does he go? Where does he go? If those first 3 teams don't pull the trigger, how far does he slide? Like you're looking at an Aaron Rodgers, Brady Quinn-esque kind of slide down the draft board.
Oh, 100%. Because let's look at this as it stands today. Now, this could all change, and if the board changes, I'll reverse and retract what I said. The Titans are going to go Cam Ward. That seems like a lot, right? And I think we could pretty much write that in pen. The Browns, with everything they've ever done in the draft under this current GM and this head coach, they're going Carter. They or trade back. And that but as it stands today, they are not taking a quarterback. And I know they need one, but I don't think they're going to do it. The Giants have just told you they're not drafting a quarterback because they've not just signed Jameis Winston, but they have signed Russell Wilson. You are not bringing in Shedeur Sanders into a room where you've got Russell Wilson and Jameis Winston. They are telling you that we'll go and get our guy next year. We'll go get our guy next year. We're going to pass. Now, listen, if Cam Ward falls to 3, I'll reverse that position and they might take him. But on the assumption that Cam Ward goes 1, I don't see it. Patriots have got their guy. Jags have got their guy. The Raiders have got their guy. The Jets have signed Justin Fields. They've got their guy. Panthers, I wouldn't rule it past them, but would you really go Shadir Sanders after you've just gone, with an archetype? Not, I would say archetype similar, but it's sort of a quarterback with similar challenges to what Shadir Sanders is going to face. You're not going to sort of go like for like there. It doesn't make any sense. The Saints won't. The Bears have got their guy. The 49ers have got their guy. The Cowboys have got their guy. The Dolphins have got their guy. The Colts have just signed Daniel Jones. So, I mean, they could, but I don't think so. The Falcons have got their guy. The Cardinals have got their guy. All of a sudden, we're at 17. Bengals have got their guy. The Seahawks have got their guy. The Bucks have got their guy. We're into pick 20 now.
Pittsburgh, aren't we?
Yeah, so Pittsburgh at 20. Pittsburgh at 21. And if they sign Aaron Rodgers, that's not going to happen. I mean, it could. At 21, there's some value there, but I'm not sure. But let's say that's a possibility. Chargers aren't going to do it. I mean, the Chargers aren't going to do it. Green Bay aren't going to do it. The Vikings aren't going to do it. The Texans aren't going to do it. Then you get to LA at 26. Now it'd be silly, but maybe. So I just don't see a world where Shadir Sanders, I said in a podcast that for me, if more than one QB goes in round one, that is wild. I don't see the value. Now, people might trade up at the back end of the first to go and get a guy and take the 5-year contract route. That could make sense. But just as the landscape stands, I don't see this world of 3 QBs going in like the top 3, the top 5, the top. So I don't see it. I don't see what everyone else sees. Now, whether that's just because I'm stupid but I've just explained my logic there, and it doesn't ring true to me. And I'm not even going on skill and talent. I'm just going on what the NFL is telling us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I don't get it. This is my problem with the mock drafts. We've seemed to have got into almost like a consensus echo chamber that these things are just predestined to happen. And I'm like, they don't have to. Look at a couple of years ago with the Kenny Pickett draft. They had one QB in the first 3 rounds. And the best quarterback in that draft was Brock Purdy. He was Mr. Irrelevant. We can have drafts where there isn't a lot of quarterbacks going early. I just don't. I don't know. I just feel the mock drafts feel very lazy. That there's a lot of consensus going on. I felt in previous years, and maybe, as you say, this goes to your point a little bit on there's a lot of talent, not a lot of fantasy talent. And because there's not a great load of offensive talent, it kind of feels more difficult. So people are just kind of, I don't want to say phoning it in, because that's not fair to the people putting out the content, but it just feels like there's a lot of similarity there. And I'd like to see a mock where someone does something a little different. Look at, I haven't seen a mock with 1 QB in the first round. I haven't seen one. So I'd like to see that and see what that plays like, because I think that's a realistic option. And again, I could be wrong, but it's by the by. It's just, I think it's an interesting debate. And I think before we talk about the rookies, the sentiment I give out to people every year is, and you've hit the nail on the head here, NFL talent doesn't equate to fantasy points. There are many great NFL players in fantasy positions who don't contribute brilliant fantasy points. In the same way that really bad players can contribute really good fantasy. I've mentioned Jameis Winston already. It's a great example, right? So there are players who are not great picks from a real life perspective, but if they get the opportunity, they can put up reasonable fantasy points, and that doesn't make them great players. This is the thing that eats me with Justin Fields. The fantasy community thinks Justin Fields is a great quarterback. I think he's a below average quarterback. I think but it's because he runs. It's like, great, he can run with the ball. He's a poor man's Lamar Jackson, because he can't throw the ball. His completion percentage is under 60% for his career. Maybe gone slightly over with what he did in the Steelers. But I don't see a world where Lamar Jackson is a top 16 quarterback, where Justin Fields is a top 16 quarterback. But the fantasy community will rate him highly because he's on their teams on Sunday and he scores them points. And I think you have to, when you're thinking about the talent that's being evaluated, don't think about, oh, well, they've gone this high in the draft, therefore I need to take them. Think a little bit outside the box. But that's why we're here, Phil, right? We're going to break through some of these. We're going to talk about them. Let's talk about this QB class, because
sure,
I don't think there's a lot of debate in this class that it's not a great class. I think we recognize that last year's class was as good as it's going to be for a while. We've had a couple of these classes where there's been these 4 or 5 first round, top of second round QB classes. And we know this is not it, as we kind of have alluded to already. What's your feeling on, is there for you an elite fantasy quarterback in this group?
No, but there is one with a skill set that could potentially translate into him being an elite QB further down the line if he puts everything together, and that's Cam Ward. Okay. Cam Ward's skill set lends itself to scoring fantasy points, and he's got immense arm talent. He can drive it with velocity and touch where necessary. Quick trigger, good mechanics. Poise in the pocket. In fact, one of the criticisms is he often looks too casual in the pocket as he just strolls around looking for shots to take. Pre-snap intelligence. He's good out of structure. He's got that kind of that modern Mahomes type scramble that everyone wants the quarterback to have, to just be able to extend plays enough. And he's got that arm arrogance, I call it, where he's willing to take a chance. And as a dynasty owner, you would better be willing to take the rough with the smooth. If you play in a league where high turnover penalties cost you points, might want to be patient. But I think he has the potential to develop into a top-end NFL quarterback with the skill set. If he's coached right and that talent is directed and fostered and grown the right way, in a similar way, if you look, and I'm not saying for a moment he's going to be Lamar Jackson. That's a really audacious claim. But if you look at the player Lamar was when he came into the league and the player he is now, it's a very, very different type of quarterback. And I do feel like Cam Ward has got a natural skill set with some talents that can't be taught. If they can just kind of hone in some of the erratic and really kind of focus and channel him, you could have a very high-end, potentially elite fantasy quarterback. But right now, I mean, in short, the answer is no, but one with the potential.
Yeah, I'm probably not as high on Cam Ward as that. I think if we were talking about Cam Ward coming in last year's class, he's a second-round quarterback. I don't think he gets talked about in the group of those that got drafted last year. I just don't think he's there. I take your point. I think he could improve. I look at where he's going to land, i.e. Tennessee, and I think, is there a pathway to him getting elite talent around him in the next 5 years? Now, listen, they could draft really well over the next couple of years and they might get somewhere, but I don't have faith in Brian Callahan. Yeah. I don't have faith in the organization he's going to develop him. I think the last time the Titans had a quarterback on the border of elite is probably Steve McNair. So we're going 20 years. And I think that's a situational problem. And then you've got a guy who, in the pocket with protection, will be as good as anybody, right? There's no denying, if he is in a clean pocket with time to go, he is going to be very, very, very good. Passing production, 90th percentile of all passes that were invited to the combine since the year 2000. So, but if you put him, the two things I think for him, one is throwing outside the pocket. He is worse than anybody in this class by a long way. If you look at it, that he 7.5% turnover worthy play rate when pressured is high, 54% on target throws when throwing outside the pocket. That's the lowest of anyone in this class. 5.8% interception rate is really bad. 2.93 time to throw. He's not going to get that in the NFL. Yeah, there's a lot of things. And he's got this hero complex. He reminds me of Jameis, that he will try and win games on his own, which when it comes off is superb. I think he's going to be brilliant to watch. I think if you're talking about entertainment value for me, the Titans are now going to have a watchable QB. I think if you're a Titans fan, you should be excited because he will make mistakes, but he will be a red zone highlight reel on his own. He will make a lot of plays. I don't see a world in fantasy where, unless there's injuries to players in the top 10, that he cracks the top 10 in the next few years. So I think in a super flex, he's kind of the positional value to take him reasonably high almost makes sense because the rest of this class isn't going to get anywhere near it. And so if you're sitting in the middle of the first round, there is some merit to taking him. Do I think he's an automatic pick in a super flex draft in the first 3 picks? No. I think there's 3 guys, maybe 4 I would have over him in a super flex draft. But I think over that, there's a case to take him. But I think for me, he's the only quarterback that gets into the first round of a super flex draft.
Yeah, he's the ideal player. You know, if you're in a league that's been running a few years, there is somebody who is very quarterback needy. Yeah. And if you are sat at the 103, you want to be knocking on doors because and saying to these managers, you want to be targeting those managers and saying, come and get your quarterback.
I would say that he could be the only quarterback that starts day one in this draft, and I think he will be. I think he's the only quarterback ready to go day one.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think you could take that knowledge, and I think you could, as you say, if you're the 103, you should be shopping that pick, and really say with the 102, if you get a king's ransom at the 102. You know, I think if you're in those spots, you should sell for the king's ransom because there is someone that will pay you a lot of money, a lot of picks and players to get him. So
that's it.
Yeah, I think that's a good spot. Are there any other starters? Now, obviously, we don't know where they're landing, but for you, let's extrapolate out 2 years, 25, 26. Do you think there are any other starters in this class that could start in a league?
I don't think there is any other quarterback other than Cam Ward who will potentially get a second contract as an NFL starter in 5 years' time. I think the rest of the group project as potential high-end backups. Listen, I have a real soft spot as a collegiate player for Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart was my QB that won me my first ever college fantasy league. And I want to believe that that's going to translate to the next level. But one of the things that people don't look at enough in Dynasty is the scheme and the offensive kind of playbook that a college has installed and the QB has implemented. And there is a real concern that despite Jackson Dart's physical traits, he ran a run and gun kind of spread offense under Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss, where he never really had to look past his first or second read. And there is not going to be a QB in this draft process where what happens behind the scenes and on the board matters more, because he needs to show that he can understand things to have even a shot. But right now, Charles Davis is mocking him number 3 overall. You know, we've drank the Kool-Aid. We are going absolutely wild for it, and I want to believe in him because I'll forever have that affinity that he won me my first college fantasy title. But I would also bloody love it if he ended up at the Steelers at 21 because I'm not convinced he's ready.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in Jackson Dart. I think there's a player in there that's got some things to overcome. And in a super flex, if he gets opportunities, you could sit there and say that there's an appeal there. But yeah, I don't see, as you say, I think there's so many things with Jackson Dart that I'm concerned about. I watched him against the Gators with their college playoff season on the line, and he just wilted. Very much as a system quarterback by the purest of definitions. There are very few teams that will suit his style of play. And that's going to be a big, big problem. Same with Shedeur Sanders, right? I've got the same the same. And I think it's funny because people have identified that on Dart. People have not identified that on Sanders. People think that Sanders can go and walk into 32 teams. I think he can play for 4 because he's effectively a West Coast offense quarterback. And those 4 teams have quarterbacks. So I can't see a team that doesn't play a West Coast offense benefiting from having Shadow Sanders. And again, these goes back to the thing. I actually have a name of a player who, if things break right, could be a starter in fantasy, but there would need to be there'd have to be some luck. And I think on top of that, there would need to be a situation where he does some significant development, and that is Jalen Milroe. Now, I'm going to park the NFL assessment side of me over here because I don't think Jalen Milroe should ever start in the NFL. I don't think he's good enough. I don't think he's got the ability to be a consistent starter in this league. So I'm going to put that over here. But then I said the same about Justin Fields. And I just feel like Jalen Milroe is the sort of player with the sort of tape, with that rushing ability that someone is just going to go, I'll have a bit of it. I'll take the risk, and I'll take him at the top of the second round, and let's see what we can do. They'll get in a situation where the veteran quarterback won't work well, and then all of a sudden he gets games. All of a sudden he wins a couple of games with his legs, and then we're away at the races. And I just think with what he does with the legs, pure definition of a Konami code quarterback, if it breaks for him to start in this league for a couple of years, then, and I think because of that rushing ability, and people want that, but it's not that common, he will get more opportunities than he will probably deserve. And so that for me is the only other sort of starter that I think taking him is a risk, because you could get 0 on your investment. But if it breaks right and he goes to it, if some team, and I'm just looking at the board, top of the second round. Oh, let's find a decent. I'm just looking at the board. Right. I'm just trying to find I'm trying to pull up mock draftable. It's just taking a bit of time. So
right. While you have a look,
I
was going to say, as an Alabama fan, Jalen Milroe has put me through it the last couple of years.
Oh yeah.
In term, just to give people the idea, like you're talking about a guy who might enter the league as a rushing player only, and as a rushing quarterback, second only to Lamar Jackson. In terms of just pure speed and ability as a runner, he is physically imposing, and I think the difficulty is, and I've said it a lot on the kind of Wildcard Devy shows, when we've been watching these quarterbacks throughout the season, is I think he's been well coached. I think the coaches that have worked with him have tried to get him to go through his progressions, to read an offense, but it just hasn't worked. He looks confused under pressure. He doesn't recognize blitzes at all. He is late to utilize his superpower. I've described his rushing ability as a superpower. And if you want to see what that looks like at its best, go watch him absolutely destroy LSU last year. Yeah. But he's reluctant to do it. He's reluctant to take off. He wants to do all the right things. Yet it's like watching your legs do one thing and your brain do something completely different. It is maddeningly frustrating, and I really wanted him. One as an Alabama fan, but two because he is a stand-up chap. Like the people at Alabama absolutely raved about him in terms of his leadership, his work ethic, all the behind-the-scenes intangibles. I really wanted him to take those steps this year, and he didn't. And all it's done is those maddening inconsistencies have kind of left him as nothing more than a really high upside raw development kind of project. Now, for fantasy, you're right. In the second round, like if you've been in a league 4 or 5 years, go back and look at your second round draft picks over the last 5 years and look at how many. In fact, just go into Sleeper. If you play on Sleeper, open up your fantasy league's previous seasons and go back and look at the names in the second round of those drafts. And it is a smorgasbord of absolute garbage. And when you consider, when you look at it, it's probably like 1 in 5 that actually hits and makes an impact on a fantasy roster.
It's less than 7%. It's less than 7% of second round picks hit. So I always have a general rule that after you're picking after the 20th pick overall. So if you're in the 10-team league, that's the 210. If it's the 12-team league, it's the 208. That's my line of demarcation of everyone else is literally a dart throw.
Yep.
So go for the highest of upsides.
Exactly. Because... And that's where Milrose's sweet spot is.
Yeah, I've just been pulling up the draft order. It took a while. So I'm looking at these 2 teams here for me that I think are really interesting, that if they do it and if they pull the trigger on Jalen Milroe, his fantasy stock automatically becomes a first round pick. And they're Cleveland and New Orleans. Because Cleveland, he's fighting Kenny Pickett for a job. That could go his way. And he might not get there straight away. I don't think Pickett lasts the season as a starter. Deshaun Watson, that's clearly a no-go area. There's an opportunity there where he competes quite early. The other is New Orleans. You know that Derek Carr is on a clock. He could play lights out. They can't afford him next year. He is gone. He could win the MVP, and he's probably still gone, barring some miracle. And that's not going to happen. So for me, if he lands in that range of those 2 teams, I look at it and think, wow, you really could be off to the races with him in terms of his value. Yeah. And I think he will shoot up boards. So it'll be interesting there. That's why there's an interest for me. I actually have him in my rankings as my QB2 for fantasy, not real life. So yeah, I am very much there on him. Let's just talk about, is there anyone at this position that you think are some sleepers? You mentioned Jackson Dart. Is there anyone here that is a potential sleeper here that you think if things break right, it could all go quite well for him, or not really?
Like I said, I think you've got a lot of career backups. But if there was one, if you want to take the kind of, like, if you look at someone that entered the league with like literally zero hype, I think he was 6th round potentially. But you look at what Tyler Bagent's done with the Bears. I could see Tyler Shaw getting a similar type of making a similar type of career for himself. He's coming in. He's such a weird prospect, man. I think he's played 7 years of college football. Just with COVID eligibility, redshirt injury seasons. But he has got, I think he's going to be, and again, teams will be really, really wary of the whole Brandon Whedon thing and how that worked. But he's got, like, just on pure arm talent, like when you look at the way the ball kind of moves and his mechanics, it's the best in the class. It's the best by a long, long way. But his age, the kind of level, like he only spent that kind of final season at Louisville. The long-term projection there is limited, but I think he's got the potential to be a very, very good backup, a really good spot starter if your starter goes down with injury. But would you want him clogging up a spot on your roster long-term? Probably not.
Yeah, I can't get there, unfortunately. I got him as a dart throw, and I think it's purely because I just admire the fact that he's probably the only player that's gone to college and got a pension from college because he was there so long. He's going to start the season age 26. That's quite impressive. I think I like him, but he's made of glass. I don't know. my sleeper here is Kyle McCord. I actually think this kid's got all the throws. The knock on him is, well, he didn't do it at Ohio State. I can think of a lot of quarterbacks that didn't do it at Ohio State. Joe Burrow didn't do it at Ohio State. Lots of quarterbacks don't do it at Ohio State. That doesn't make them bad. It just means it's a situational thing that didn't work. Kyle McCord last year was absolutely phenomenal. I mean, I'm going to read out some bits as to why I like Kyle McCord. First of all, no quarterback in this draft class had more dropbacks last season than Kyle McCord, 640. That was 77 more than the next player. He has the fastest time to throw in this class at 2.4 seconds. He also threw the lowest rate of passes at or behind the line of scrimmage. So just 12.5% were sort of screens and dump passes, which is impressive. Right. You add to that, he played for Syracuse and he was leading the country in so many statistics last year. And he's a pure drop back passer. He's not great with his legs, but do you know what? This kid's got everything. He's got the attitude, the swagger. There's something about him that it's almost like the Brock Purdy effect. He walks into a situation, and I think for me, if I could literally pick up Kyle McCord and put him anywhere, it would be LA. Under Sean McVay. Let him sit under Stafford for a year. Let him learn, get the McVay culture, and you hand him the reins in a year, 18 months' time. My word. If I could pick him up and put him there, we'll go to the moon, baby, because I think he could really be a starter at this. I genuinely believe there's things he's got to work on, but I think he could do it. But I've got him as my QB3 for fantasy because I just think that arm is superior to anybody else in this class. I have a bit of a soft spot for Will Howard. I think he needs some things to go his way. Landing, yeah, he's another one. If he went to LA, I'd become a lot more invested and interested in him. But I got him at 5. I do have Dart at 4. I do think he's just a little bit more down the road. I've Sanders, controversial take. Cesar Sanders is my QB6 in this draft for fantasy. I don't see a ceiling. I just don't see a ceiling. The guy's going to throw for 250 yards and a game, get a few yards on the ground, and he's going to get minimal touchdowns. Unless your league is rewarded with high accuracy, like if he finishes above 70% of his part, like that the Scott Fish Bowl scoring where they do completion, you get completion bonuses. Then he shoots well up the rankings, but that's it. That's the only thing he's got in his locker. So yeah, I'm kind of there with him. So I'm out on Shedeur Sanders. I won't be taking any of him, and I'm fine with that. Let's move to RBs. It's a little bit more exciting. I would say this is probably the best RB class I've seen in the last decade.
Yeah,
close to that. I would say
it's the Christian McCaffrey class.
This is Christian McCaffrey, Leonard Fournette class. 17 maybe, yeah. So to 8 years, and this one could come out better.
Without doubt.
How many elite running backs would you say are in this class? There's a good debate here as to the number.
Yeah, so I'm gonna hold you to the definition of elite, because if you want truly elite that transcends draft classes.
So I'm going potential elite, as in like.
Right, cool.
So I would say, for example, players who could get to that level, but things would break right. I don't believe that a college player walks in and is elite as much as everyone wanted to anoint Bijan Robinson as that. I mean, he has not transcended to that.
No,
that level. And we're talking about we talked about last year and everything that's happened, with the Giants and then moving to Philly, and we look at we looked at what happened there, and it took time. You have to be on the right team for things to happen for you. So I think for me, the opportunity to be great at elite, but it won't be there straight away, potentially. So like Saquon was a player who was a rookie of the year, had a good season, a couple of bad years, bit up and down, but then he goes to a good team and lights it up. So potential elite, but not saying you're going to walk in day one and be elite.
Yeah, cool. I think you've got a clear cutoff after 6. All
Wow,
right,
you've
and
gone
then I
high,
think,
okay.
there's where the clear teardrop is. But I think there's also a sub tier within those 6.
Yeah, okay.
I think the clear bell of the ball is Ashton Ginty. That'll be a name that even the most casual fan is well aware of at this point. And let's just spoil it. Let's tell everyone how to draft. If he's not your 101, you're doing something wrong. If you're not, mate,
Not me.
I can't get there. I can't get there. It's got to be. It's got to be for me. In the tier below him, I have 3, and you can toss them up anywhere you like. I've got Henderson, Judkins, and Hampton in that kind of just tier down. I've then got I'm really high on Cam Scatterbo. I didn't think I would be.
Yeah.
I had to go back, like, and as much as and this is a really kind of good kind of reminder just how much college football there is on any given weekend, right? Because I got through the vast majority of the season watching the SEC, paying attention to what Cam Ward was doing in the SEC at Miami. I didn't spend a great deal of time watching the Big 12 because there is just that much to consume. That Cam Scatterbo, until Arizona State were right there on the kind of cusp of winning the Big 12 title, I'd seen the numbers, but hadn't really put my eyes on the tape. And so all of a sudden, when you saw him in the college football playoffs and everyone sat up and went, wow, look at this guy. I made it my point to go back away and have another look. And it blew me away, to be quite frank. He went from being somebody completely not on my radar as a top-end prospect to now I want to sit him up there with a Marion Hampton. I'm not as high on a Marion Hampton as some. A lot of people are saying he's the kind of 1B to Ginty being 1A. I don't see it personally, but I'm putting Cam Scatterbo into that mix. And I suppose the one that I'm a little bit lower on, but I think there is a definite tier break after him, is Caleb Johnson.
I'm with you.
I think he needs the system more than the other guys do. He needs to be in the right scheme in order to really dominate. But the physical traits are definitely there.
That's really interesting. So where I'm at, right, I'm going to be the only person in the world that doesn't have Ashton Ginty as my 101. And there's a couple of very, very good reasons. Okay. One is the amount of work he's already done. Okay. That to me is a concern. There's a lot of tread on those tires. 2, I don't like the fact he's not run a 40 this year. David, I get it, like the risk of running it, as we've seen with some players.
Yeah.
But there's a concern for me that he didn't back himself to do it. That shows a little something to me I don't like. I'm not a big fan on consensus 101s that are just put in and nobody challenges it. Like I don't like it. Like I never have got on the board of, well, Marvin Harrison Jr. is the consensus wide receiver 101, and there's stuff to even have a debate about it. I'm like, we're going to mock him at first round back or top of the second in startup drafts, in fantasy football redrafts. The kid's not played. Like I just can't ever get there without a challenge. For me, my problem with Ginty isn't anything to do with him other than not running the 40, the tread on the tires. I just think, and I think as well, he's going to go to a bad team. And I think it's going to take some time. I think negative game script's going to hit him for a couple of years. I think we're going to see a slower trajectory with him because of that. And I think that's going to hinder him, which is why I am on Hampton as my 101, right?
Right, okay.
So Hampton, for me, did run the 40. He ran a brilliant 40. For a guy who is 225, he ran a phenomenal 40. His speed score is off the charts. The only players in history to have his speed score at 215 pounds plus while posting above a 15% reception share and a yards per play of 225, right? This is a very small list. Todd Gurley and David Johnson.
Wow.
And Hampton got there. the metrics and everything that this guy does with his size, with his ability, and everything that he's got screams to me that he is the least landing spot dependent of anyone, because he is an absolute beast. He can handle the ball better than anybody. And for me in this class, he is going to be, if he goes to a bad team, he's going to be the playmaker, because he's going to be the guy who will do it all. And I just look at him and I think exactly that. And I just think for me, he's in a phenomenal place. I look at him and I think if we look back at this in 3 years from now, I can see a pathway to here. He's the best running back in this class. I really can. And I could get it on GT 100%. I get it. What he did last year was nothing short of outstanding. Like, it is as good a dominant performance as you will ever see. I doubt we'll see seasons like that again. But that also makes me weary of, can you do it again? Like, how often can you put that in? That's my concern. I mean, that's all it is. It's so tight. And I have Henderson in there. Those three for me are the three I could say could be potentially elite players. I'd say, and there could be more, but I have three. And I have a clear break there on those three. I have no problem making the case. And look, if you have Gene T at 1, I get it. You had Henderson at 1, which I don't think anyone does. I could get there. Like, I could get there on any of those players. I am always going to be a little different. That's kind of just how I am. I'm quite happy with that. I'm there on Johnson. I actually have Johnson over Scalabo. Judkins, I'm there on. Tootin, for me, is probably the most interesting of that next year. Yeah. Because I think he could be elite, but I'm not willing to go there yet. But there's just so much about him I absolutely love that I think, And Devin Neal, I think, could get there. I think for me, those guys, those 8, but that group of 5 of Judkins, Johnson, Scatterbo, Tootin, and Neal are really interesting to me. That I think that they really are going to be starters at this level. They're going to be weekly starters in your fantasy team. They're going to put up good points. I'm good there. I think this is a great class. I think for me, I can't remember the last time I did one of these and put, there's 8 starters. There's 8 fantasy starters in here. Easy. 8 fantasy starters that you could lock in and feel pretty good, which out of, 24 plus flex, that's a lot. But there's a lot of teams that need running backs. There's a lot of vacancies. There's a lot of holes. A lot of older players that could get usurped quickly. I think 8 of these guys minimum could be starters. Yeah. Are there any sort of sleepers? And then finish your thought as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting what you said. Like, in terms of sleepers, particularly for fantasy, look, the majority of leagues are trending towards PPR. You want backs with a track record of catching passes. So there's 2 that I think have been massively slept on, and that's Woody Marks from USC. And LaQuint Allen, again, from Syracuse, who did a lot of work with Kyle McCord last year. Now, LaQuint Allen runs a good route tree from the backfield, caught a lot of passes, as did Woody Marks. And I just think those guys, like, this is the perfect year, right? We've already talked about, like, what a dart thrower looks like after the kind of mid to back end of the second round. Like, it really is a lottery. If you, I mean, for God's sake, in every deal, I just throw those picks away in order to make it look a little bit sweeter when I'm trading in season. But it's very, very rare that I earn anything past the second, to be quite honest. But if I've got some of that shrapnel, it is the perfect year to just don't gamble on a late wide receiver. There's no point. All right, the hit rate's going to be piss poor, but opportunity for these running backs. The way the league goes through them in terms of injury potential, etc., etc. Get on some of these running backs with any late round dart throw you've got. Pick the next best back that you like the look of. But those 2 for me, LaQuint Allen and Woody Marks, and then my guy Kyle Monunge as well. Like, all 3 guys who have got potential to not just be spot players, but actually craft out a significant role that would trust you eventually to play them in your flex spot. I think those are 3 names to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I would also say I'm going to throw a name out there, which is Brashard Smith. He's someone that is really intriguing me, that I think he's someone that I've got a bit of an eye on, that I think could do something. And if I was going really deep, Ulysses Bentley, the fourth, is someone that I just have a little bit of an eye on. Do I expect it to pay off? No, but in the last round of a draft, I'll probably be taking quite a lot of him.
Exactly.
No, exactly that to spin him up. Let's talk about this wide receiver class. I would go as far to say that this is it's a very nice wide receiver class in the sense of there's a lot of very good-ish players. There's a lot of players that are going to come in the league. They're going to make some money. They're going to have very nice careers.
Yep,
that will be contributors to teams. Quite a few of these players will get rings. Quite a few of these players will knock around the league for 6 to 10 years, and they will earn very nice money and do very, very well. But there's not that cream for me. There's not a lot of cream at the top of this. There's a lot of very good wide receivers who can, get some games and do reasonably well. But I don't think for me, this is the first year I've looked at this and gone, there's probably less starting wide receivers than there are less starting running backs for fantasy.
Yeah.
So with that, who would you say is on that tier to be potentially elite?
Well, ironically, the best wide receiver in the draft, we're genuinely not sure is going to ever play at receiver. There's a real conundrum still in what to do with Travis Hunter. Until we see how he's announced on draft night and where he ends up, I don't think you can safely rely on any ADP in fantasy drafts because that will flip things massively. I
agree.
And until we know that, we can talk about him all day long. Phenomenal hands, phenomenal route running and intelligence, potential to be all pro playing both ways. Like we've not seen that since Charles Woodson. He's a special player, and if he ends up at the Patriots, even if they announce him as a cornerback, he's a first round draft pick for me because he's going to walk in there, and even if they announce him as a corner, he is going to be streets the best receiver on their books. And for that reason, it's not going to take long until they want to win games and rely on the best playmaker in the entire organization. And he starts taking those steps and taking those snaps on offense. But outside of him, I genuinely don't think there is a truly elite player. I think Ted McMillan falls into that next tier of very good, but we're desperate for someone to be elite. So that's where people have started using when he perhaps isn't quite deserving. I think he's the tier of very, very good. Outside of that, you've got some really interesting players, but every single one of them has got questions. If you look at Luther Burden, phenomenal talent, phenomenal athlete and run after catch threat. But there will be genuine questions about the drop off. Now, it seems very cool to be out of favor with Luther Burden at the moment. He just ran another outstanding 40 for a guy his size and for his build. And I feel like not enough people are quite giving him flowers yet. But ultimately, the questions have got to be asked about why that fall off came this year. Because he went from being a world beater in his sophomore season to barely clocking 600 yards this season and kind of regressing in just about every meaningful category, which is a concern. You've then got Matthew Golden, who has burst onto the scene. Obviously ran a lot faster than his college teammate, who was supposed to be the one that ran fast. Looks promising, but it's a fairly limited sample size in terms of top quality production. The one for me, the one that I will be looking to take plenty of gambles on is Trey Harris, because I think that skill set potentially could be a game breaker at the next level. But again, the consistency element of that isn't quite there. It's been a very, very good final season. I think what's important with Trey Harris is he has improved every single year. And then the one that just gets slept on it is Emeka Egbuka. I don't think Emeka Egbuka is going to ever trouble a wide receiver one season in terms of being a top 12 finisher. However, I think you could get a career from him as a high-end wide receiver two. Or low-end, even as a low-end receiver two, high-end receiver, wide receiver three, that you can start week in, week out and know that he is going to net you points from the slot, He's going to score you 10 to 12 points every single week. He'll have the odd week where he blows the doors off, but he's just such a high floor prospect. I just don't necessarily see the elevation and the ceiling in his game. But ultimately, they're the players that flesh out your lineup and win your championships.
100%. I mean, I'm there on him. At the moment, he's Booker is my wide receiver 4, only because I have Hunter below him because of this uncertainty, right? I have Hunter at 5 purely because I'm not prepared to crown him as the wide receiver 1 when he might not even be a wide receiver. So he sits at 5 for me. I'm going to shock you and tell you that Luther Burden is my wide receiver 1. I think for me, I look at a player like that and think of what he did and go, this was a player who was criminally misused last year. You've got a player who can go and win outside, and they lined up 83% in the slot. Now, listen, the slot usage happens to elite players because they want to get them the football, right? Happened with Justin Jefferson, happened with Brandon Ayuk, happened with all of these players in the history, Jackson Smith and Jigba, right? So, but ultimately, what he has done is elite. There is this, did he take his foot off the gas? I don't know. I personally think, and I look at Missouri and think he was personally mismanaged. And I look at players that undercook in their final year and think, okay, but why? And I think purely it was the way that he was lined up and the way that Missouri offense was very, I'm going to call it pedestrian. The only time you got to remember in the SEC, right? You've got either the most challenging of games or the easiest of games, and there really is kind of no in between in the SEC. You're going to have weeks where you're going to go up against Alabama, Florida, and South Carolina, and LSU and Georgia, and then you're going to have weeks where you play like Murray State, and it's just like it just goes either way. And on those games where, against the big teams last year, Missouri, they were pretty crap. They got absolutely smashed by Texas A&M, 41-10. They got shut out by Alabama. Against South Carolina, they did quite well. I argue that South Carolina was slightly overinflated in their position, but, at least they put 30 on them. So against good teams, this offense didn't run. And, I think, again, that's how much of that is Burden versus Brady Cook and company.
Yeah, sure.
And I think for me, I can get there on Burden. I do have Ted McMillan at 2. I just think he has all of it. But yeah, I mean, I have Booker at 4, Golden at 3, Hunter at 5. Hunter could go up, of course he could. But yeah, I like you said about Trey Harris. I like Tez Johnson. I think there's some really interesting players in that sort of flex appeal. Restrepo obviously did himself a world of pain. With his 40 time, one of the worst 40 times we will probably ever see. There was a funny thing where they were saying that he ran a 40 less than Tristan Wirfs.
It is interesting, isn't it? Because in the immediate aftermath of that, he hopped on social media like a lot of the players do now, and kind of said, go watch the tape. I don't need to run in straight lines, this, that, and the other. All right, yep, that's fine, but you're not going to be doing anything to make defenses worry about you, like running like that. Because even then, take the stopwatch away, it looked slow. It looked bad. And then I think in the immediate aftermath, I don't know whether he's trying to do some damage limitations, but he's now come out and said there's a hamstring injury and he wanted to run because he didn't want to. Look, who knows? Who knows? Yeah. But what he's done is, like, for just purely for him from an NFL draft perspective, that's probably like one of the most expensive 40-yard dashes ever, because he has just cost himself a ton of money.
He will be lucky to go bottom day 2.
Yeah, without a doubt.
And he could fall into day 3 quite easily. I think there's enough there. I have got him in my top 15. He's at the bottom of that top 15. Well, Jimmy Horton's bottom of that 15. But I have him sort of at 14. He was higher than that before that run, but I think that's going to turn some people off. But for me, I still think he's worth it. I think he's going to get to the point in fantasy drafts where, because that's been so overplayed, he actually becomes a value. And I'll actually buy into. I always love it when there's this narrative of being so completely out on someone that I have to buy it for the chip on the DK Metcalf. How many people were out on DK Metcalf because of his 3-cone? It became one of the greatest jokes ever. The same with Jamar Chase. He can't catch the ball because he's not used to not having lines on the ball. Right. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes this hyperbole of something that just comes out just steers people in one direction. And I'm just a contrarian player. If everyone's going one way, I'm going to buy the other side. Because what's the worst that happens? I spend a 3rd, 4th round pick on him and he flops. Okay, fine. I'll get over that. Yeah. But if he ends up getting anywhere to where he would have been had he not run a 482, then I'm like, yeah, do you know what? I'm in. Like, I just think go the other way on him. I think there's some value there. So there's some interesting players, but I think there's a lot of good players, no, not great players. And I think that, what I do like about this, there isn't that consensus at the top of the class. I love the fact that people are going in different directions. I actually think when I look at the wide receivers here, I think it's the most interesting because people don't have a set opinion. And it's really great to see that there's a lot of debate on the Burdens, the McMillans, the Goldens, the Hunters, the Isaiah Bonds. You can make a case for about 6 guys being number 1. And I love that. That says to me that there's a lot of interest here. And actually your skill is going to get you there, which is cool. Let's lastly, because we're running out of time, quickly catch up on tight ends. Do you have any in this class that you think could potentially be elite, and then how many would you say would go on to be starters?
I think you've got 2 names that have dominated the headlines in Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. They win in very, very different ways. I've seen one compared to Kelsey and the other compared to Gronk in terms of how they win. And that kind of school of 2 different types of tight end, but both have been very productive. Both offer. I mean, I just cannot. The one thing I will say for the mock drafts is I can't see anything other than Colston Loveland ending up with Jim Harbaugh. It just makes so much sense. However you look at it, I just see it happening. Those 2 will be early contributors. I don't think I'm as high on Tyler Warren as everyone else. Some of the things he did last year were remarkable. But in a lot of games where Penn State were the bullies and were expected to do these things anyway. And he will be a very, very good player, but I'm seeing people now saying he's as good a prospect as Brock Bowers was. And to me, we're in a completely different world there. I can't get on board with that. And I think it's just, do I think he's going to be good? Sure. Am I comfortable putting him in that bracket? Absolutely not. And I just kind of want to help people temper expectations slightly if they think we're getting the second coming of Brock Bowers.
No, I do agree with that, but I absolutely love Tyler Warren. I was on Tyler Warren quite a long time. I think when we started talking about him and tight ends, I think he was the tight end 3 in this class when it all started to be the discussion sort of end of the season and then getting into senior day, and then it's all just got better and better for him, and Harold Fannin has kind of fallen away from the conversation. Fannin was kind of 1-2, it was kind of Loveland Fannin, and then Warren was kind of underneath. Warren has usurped to the top just because he's got the best tape. Guy did everything. He ran in touchdowns, he caught a touchdown, he threw a touchdown, like he did everything right.
All in the same game.
Yeah, all in the same game. Phenomenal. Like, it's just, it doesn't get better than that for me. So, a fun guy to watch. And I think people have fallen in love with the tape, maybe more than the attributes. I'm there on Tyler Warren for me, but I was there, I think, a long time before. I do like Loveland, though. I get your point. I think he could go to 2 places. I think he could go to Harbaugh. I think he'd go to Washington. I think either way, he's going to absolutely dominate. And then I think, Fannin drops a bit. Arroyo is in that, and I think I have a bit of a soft spot for Mason Taylor. I actually think he could be a good starter in this league and in fantasy. I think he's going to be. Now, listen, a starter in fantasy football is contributing 9 points a game. That's kind of like the 9-10 point range. It doesn't mean elite production, but it's going to be decent. But I think there's only 5 starters in this group, which again is quite a lot because normally you project 2 or 3. So I think there's a bit of a hole at tight end in this league. I don't really take dart throws on tight ends. I don't really get the point, but do you have a guy if you were to take a dart throw?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, we go back to Syracuse. Aronde Gadsden. He gets a tight end designation in terms of how he is listed on Sleeper or whatever platform you choose to play on. However, he is a big slot receiver. And he has a wide receiver skill set, big catch radius, big red zone threat. Highly productive, explosive in the red zone. Again, I get you. Not a lot of late round dart throws should really be taken on tight ends. But he's a guy I like. You probably, if you play in a shallow league with a 3-round rookie draft, take him on waivers as a free agent afterwards. Stick him on your taxi squad and just make sure you've got him so no one else can, just in case.
No, I agree. I think there's some interesting ones. Terrence Ferguson, Gunnar Helm. You think maybe, but yeah, I don't think there's much here. If I had to go, there isn't. Yeah, there just isn't enough here that you can kind of reach for. I think it's going to be interesting, but there is a world where you can do quite well if you don't need quarterbacks and get yourself one of those top 3 running backs and get yourself one of those tight ends, and I think you could be in a really good spot to start. But I think really I'm looking at this. So on my list, I've got what I'd call weekly starters. 8, 10, 17, 18, 19, 20. I've got 22, and that's probably a bit high because of the tight ends. So again, that line of demarcation, 20 players. It's kind of, again, but I only have what I call 7 elite players. So for me, once you get past I'm going to put Cam Ward not as elite, but obviously quarterbacks carry more. So I think after the 108, this draft is tick over. There's some players that you'll pick up and they'll contribute, but it's a tick over draft. And I think once you get past the 208, then I think you're kind of done. I think you're just picking up pieces in this draft. So take the throws, go deep, start taking shots from the 210 onwards or 208 onwards and just start picking them up and go from there. Because for me, 7 plus Cam Ward, there's 8 players I think are worthy of a first round pick in fantasy. And then I think everything else is a wild card. I think it's just shoot your shot and go forward. And I think if you're sitting there in the back end, you've won a ring, you've got a championship, trade the capital, get out, put it in the 2026 picks. It's a deeper class at this stage, I think. If you've got a title-winning roster, I don't think there's enough players in this draft other than maybe the running backs that are going to contribute elite performance. So your roster should be good to compete again. So if you're in the back end of rounds, I'd trade out, get your 2026 collateral, let people pay the first round premium on a second round in most years player would be my sort of advice. Any other sort of top tips for you that you'd give to people before we let you get out of here?
Yeah, there's 2 schools of thought. Like, again, and I suppose it depends on how aggressive you are as a player. But if I'm at the back end, I would rather, if I've got a spot, if I've got a player that I want, this is a class where I'm willing to throw in to go up and get them. But if I'm comfortable with their player and if it's someone I want, because I'm not worried about losing anything further down the board. I want to go, I'm in a league at the moment where I earn 3 second-round picks, and I will give all 3 for just to get into the back end of the first and take the one that slips. Take the one of the receivers I'm comfortable with that inevitably slips, because I'm not bothered about taking the shots at the second. I'd rather trade up and get someone I'm more comfortable with.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're hoarding a lot of second round picks, then trade it in. Or if you can't, or you don't like anyone enough, then trade back, go get Jalen Milroe, and then punt the rest into next year.
Yeah.
And do it that way. Or get some players now that are going to improve you, because you can get some really good veterans cheap.
This is it.
So if you're not liking, for me, I think once you're getting into the ranges of, Tutton's off the board, Bond's off the board, Scalbo's off the board, you're like, do you know what? I'm probably I'll cash out of this draft. I'll keep my late picks as throws, stick them on a taxi squad, see what happens. Let me go get some veterans. Hey, does anyone want this pick? I'll take, I'll take a solid veteran.
I did it this week. I got rid of the 212 and picked up Jacoby Myers.
Perfect.
And I'll do that every single time.
Oh, good, yeah. That's a phenomenal trade. Even if they go and get wide receiver, it's a phenomenal trade. So amazing. Phil, this has been a delight. Thank you so much for joining me. I've had a great laugh. We'll get you back on to break this down once it's all drafted out for sure. But tell everyone where they can find you, where they can interact with you, find your work and everything else.
Brilliant. So I suppose the best place to find me is on X at PoshPlayersFF. Check out any written content for InBetween Media. Go see Seth and the team. They're putting brilliant stuff out there all the time. Hopefully, in the not too distant future, there will be a Devy and college football podcast coming from InBetween Media as well. And then, of course, the Fantasy Wildcard Devy with me and Jack every second Thursday. Come and check us out for some Devy goodness.
Make sure you do that. Follow the content. Follow the man. He's dropped a lot of knowledge here. We've all got a little bit smarter from listening to Phil here for the last hour and a quarter. So, buddy, thank you so much for coming on. Rush Nation, we will be back late end next week. Stocks and I will be going more. I will try and drop some solo pods over the week, just talking through my rankings a little bit more detail. I've sort of dropped some nuggets here, but we'll go through and do the positions and just get us ready. It's almost draft month. We're literally just a few days away from draft month starting. Everyone's got to get a bit sharper. Best ball season's kicking off. It's all around the corner. Drafts, fantasy season is here earlier than ever. So let's sharpen those pencils. Let's go fill up our harbors. Let's go get those ships. But until then, Rush Nation, don't forget, as always, keep rushing.